Sadness and depression often are felt when hormones are all over the place, and this can happen so much in perimenopause, menopause and beyond. Hi. Hi, I'm Ruth and I run Menopause Mastery, where we look to help women to thrive and not just survive in menopause and beyond menopause. And guess what actually makes things so much worse in terms of sadness and depression and those kind of feelings of despair? It might surprise you, it might not, but actually a diet of processed food can affect the brain so much, bringing on feelings of anxiety, depression, can worsen brain fog, forgetfulness, sadness. All of those things can be worsened if our diet is full of ultra-processed foods. So let's say the foods in the middle aisle of the supermarket. And there's been some research done by the University of Reading, and they studied the effects of a diet high in sugar and fat, which is basically what ultra-processed foods are: cheap sugar, cheap fat. And they used 30 volunteers and looked at their brains after months of eating this diet of ultra-processed food. And scans actually revealed, and this to me is quite shocking, that the grey matter and the neurotransmitters had decreased in the brain, in the frontal lobe of the brain, okay, which controls mood. That's the area that controls our mood. So it's not surprising that a lot of the symptoms that we're getting in perimenopause, menopause, and even beyond that for the rest of our lives can actually be controlled to a certain extent. I'm not saying it's going to obliterate the symptoms, but it can be controlled to a certain extent by what we are eating, because our gut-brain axis is so strong. The messages that come from the gut to the brain and the brain to the gut, controlled by the vagus nerve, and I talk about this in so much more depth in another video, but there are more messages sent from the gut to the brain than the brain to the gut. So we need to make sure that our gut is super healthy. And that means that we need to look at what we're putting into our mouths every single day, because they did scans on people who were eating a healthy diet, and that showed the complete opposite of what I've just described. So really, we need to be making sure that we're working on, I would say the 80-20 rule is realistic, okay? So 20% of the time, your brain, your body, all your organs, everything can cope with you eating ultra-processed food, or food that's not quite, as good as the other 80%, but 80% of the time, we need to be looking at whole foods. We need to be looking at foods where there aren't 50 ingredients on the back of a packet, because that tells you an awful lot, If you go to a supermarket, you look at a packet of biscuits and there's 15 ingredients versus ones you make at home that have 4, There's a massive difference in how that is going to be perceived by your body. And when your body gets ultra-processed food put into it, it's not quite sure how to handle it, it's not quite sure what to do with it, and it upsets the microbiome in your gut. And again, in other videos, I go into much more detail about the microbiome. But for today, it's really just to say that there is a huge link between the moods you're getting, and so many people get mood swings, brain fog, you put your keys in the fridge, how did that happen? Or you get somewhere and you can't even remember how you drove there, you just arrive there and you're like, oh, can't remember the journey. The sadness that sometimes it's like a black cloud is following you around. And if you then look at your diet, you might get some answers from that. Before you start to rush to a doctor's, before you start to take some medication, how about looking at your lifestyle and saying, well, yeah, maybe I can stop eating all the biscuits or the cake or the ready meals. Ready meals are really bad for lots of ingredients. And even the sandwich that you have at lunchtime, could you look to make that at home to improve things? There are tiny, tiny habits that you can get into that can improve things so quickly in your gut, because the microbiome is changing all the time, and it's dictated to by what we eat, but also we are dictated to by our microbiome. So if all of these symptoms are going on for you, the likelihood is there's something coming from your gut. You may be getting some symptoms in your gut, but you also may not. It might not be showing anything that you're actually feeling or aware of. So I would start to keep some kind of food diary. Just take a look at what you're eating, because sometimes we do it so unconsciously that it needs somebody else to point it out to us. So if you've got it written down over a week, and you can maybe highlight the good and the bad. I'm saying bad in inverted commas, which I do quite a lot. I don't like to label things bad. But, it's not necessarily good and bad, but it is a way of looking at foods to make a change, yeah? Because there's no such thing as good or bad, really. It's just how your body is perceiving it. But a lot of us are eating too much of the foods that can create dis-ease inside of us, and that's what can then create all these symptoms in the brain. So I hope that's been helpful today. I just want to talk to you about something that we are very excited about here at Menopause Mastery. We now have a book out on Amazon. And this book is basically for you to dive into looking at you and your life. It's a series of in-depth questions so that you can work out where you're at, where you need some help with your challenges, and where you can start to look to move forwards. It may be that on the back of this you want to get a coach. This is a sort of self-coaching book, if you like, but it just gives you the start of your journey through perimenopause, menopause, or beyond. Wherever you're at right now is suitable for all. And if you want to look for me on social media, I'm under Ruth Goodwin on Facebook, Ruth Goodwin on Instagram, Ruth Goodwin Coaching on TikTok. I'm on all of those, and there's plenty of information for you. There's also lots of other videos on YouTube for you to watch, so please dive in. And if you could press the subscribe button, we'd be so grateful. Costs you nothing, but it matters to us. And if you'd like to work with me personally or in a group setting, I run a 90-day, I call it a transformation program. It's actually more about dropping the habits that aren't serving you and diving into some new habits which are going to give you a total new lease of life. So I run those programs all the time in a group of ladies, and I also do one-to-one coaching. So please just give me a shout if I can help you with anything, and have a lovely day. Take care.